So, if you saw my video earlier this week, you already know that I wasn't a big fan of the original Joker. The film itself had its moments and one good Joaquin Phoenix performance, but it never felt like this groundbreaking piece of social commentary some claimed it to be, and all of the online fervor was just exhausting. I'm not sure if its sequel, Joker Folie, Deux, is necessarily better, but I would argue that it's more interesting, simply because it offers something I can't remember seeing in a sequel before: complete and utter contempt for the fans of the first movie. Yeah, you may have noticed critics who got early screeners that were also out and proud fans of the original haven't been too thrilled with this, and the reasons why are fascinating. So fair warning, we're going full spoilers for this one. But first the positives, and ironically my favorite things about the film are what it doesn't do. Back when the sequel was announced and Lady Gaga was cast as the new version of Harley Quinn, I started mentally bracing myself. Not only was I dreading the idea of Todd Phillips trying to give some sort of hot take on one of pop culture's most abusive fictional relationships, but Gaga's on-screen performances tend to be a coin flip. Either she's playing it straight, or she's chewing through scenery like a beaver through a log cabin. Thankfully, Gaga's depiction of Harley, she goes by Lee in this version, is played relatively straightforward, and Phillips thankfully doesn't try to add in Joker's usual abuse to the relationship. It's still toxic, and the power dynamic winds up getting slanted in the opposite direction, but it doesn't try to make some inane argument about the two being destined for each other. Bullet dodged there. One other positive note, Brendan Gleeson seemed to be having fun with his role as an Arkham security guard. Good for him. Now let's talk story. It's been 2 years and Arthur is in Arkham Asylum while standing trial for the murders he committed in the first movie. His attorney is trying to make the argument that he has a split personality and that the Joker persona was responsible for the murders. Arthur has pretty much wiped any and all signs of embodying the Joker while in the asylum, but starts to come out of his shell a bit when he meets Lee, a fellow inmate who immediately admits to being a fan of his. We'll get to the musical aspect later because that's what so much of the pre-release hype and marketing was based around. But first I want to talk about the trial, because once that kicks off in the second half, the film morphs into both a re-examination of the first film and an outright condemnation of its fan base. First off, Phillips wipes out any and all theories about ambiguity from the first film by bringing back characters like Zazie Beetz to spell out in plain English who Arthur did and didn't kill, and which events were purely in his head. So if you thought that final scene and the "you wouldn't get it" line was some sort of big twist on the film's entire plot, yeah, you're out of luck, buddy. It also makes it abundantly clear how Arthur was never a character for people to put on a pedestal and rally around. Lee Gill comes back as Gary, that was the clown Arthur spared after killing Randall inside his apartment, and in one of the film's best scenes gives an emotional monologue about how an interaction audiences thought was funny was downright cruel from his perspective. Then just when it looks like Arthur is ready to give another speech like in the first movie about how he's the true victim and society is to blame, he breaks down. He openly admits to the murders and wipes away any idea that Joker is some kind of alternate persona. He has always been sad little Arthur Fleck. The Joker isn't real. Oh, but we're not done there. See, just as the jury is declaring Arthur is guilty, a car bomb goes off that blows up half the courtroom and gives Arthur the chance to escape. He's picked up by two of Joker's followers who had been swarming the courtroom throughout Arthur's trial. And after just a few minutes inside of a cab with them, Arthur decides to run away from the two while they're screaming about how much they love him. That's right, folks. Phillips thinks so little of the fans of the first movie, he has the main character straight up run away from two of them because they're the real crazy ones. And then it turns out you can count Lee in that same group. About halfway through the movie, Arthur's attorney reveals Lee willingly checked herself into Arkham and lied about her upbringing to get close to Arthur. But then once he gives up the idea of being Joker, she dumps him, revealing she was only ever interested in that version of Arthur. She also might have lied about being pregnant with his child, but that kinda gets swept away during their breakup scene. Then there's one final twist of the knife. Literally. The movie ends with a red-headed asylum inmate walking up to Arthur, telling him how much of a disappointment Arthur is, then stabs him to death while laughing maniacally before giving himself the usual Joker lip scars. That's right, it turns out Arthur was never really this franchise's actual Joker. He was just the beta tester for the real guy, who was only in the background of a few shots before the big reveal. And before you ask, no, this isn't supposed to be a younger version of Heath Ledger or Barry Keoghan. Remember, this is supposed to be set in 1983 and Bruce Wayne is like 10 right now. I'm honestly kind of impressed by how brazen all of this was. If this were a different creative team, I could see it as a statement on how they didn't like the original, but Phillips is still directing, and he and Scott Silver wrote both films, which means they're the ones upset with fans for how the first movie was received. Either because people didn't quote-unquote get it, or because they weren't thrilled by all the online film bros rallying around it. Which is doubly confusing when you remember the tirades Phillips went on before the first movie came out. Look, don't get me wrong, this still isn't good, but watching a director basically set his creation on fire while telling its fans how crazy they are is a sight to behold. Unfortunately, all that's left beyond the self-immolation are the musical numbers, and they don't work. I personally love musicals, but it feels like Phillips was pushed into the idea because Gaga was cast, rather than because he had some bold idea for it. The movie goes back and forth on whether or not the musical numbers involving Arthur and Lee are diegetic, or if it's just all in their heads, and so many of them are so boringly shot and choreographed, I honestly wondered if Tom Hooper accidentally wandered onto the set. We know Phoenix can sing, he played Johnny Cash damn near 20 years ago, but the songs they picked for him in this are completely out of his vocal range. And whenever a song takes place in the quote-unquote real world, the vocal fry from both him and Gaga is grating.
Sing hallelujah, come on, get happy. Get ready for the judgment day.
It's only in the handful of dream sequences involving the two where anything resembling interesting staging is present, and Gaga is actually allowed to show why she's been so good at performing for so long. But none of the songs are particularly memorable, nor do they advance the story whenever one starts up. You kinda need at least one of those things to make a musical at least passable, and this fails on both counts. If there's any solace I take in Joker Folie, Deux, it's that I know this kills the Joker project. Arthur is dead, Phillips is already saying he's done with the DC universe, and this is going to royally piss off fans of the first film. And if you didn't like the first film, there's not much to recommend beyond the spectacle of a car crash. So if you're on the fence, don't bother. There is much better stuff out right now. Thanks for watching.